Time's up. The battle is on. Take up the weapons God's given you, spiritual weapons, and fight the good fight. Run the race to the finish line. Please. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, we'll continue where we left off. We've been talking about life, love, and the purpose or meaning of our existence. I'm going to begin by reading from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I have nothing. If I give away all I have, and I deliver my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not jealous or boastful, it is not arrogant or rude. Love does not insist on its own way, it is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For our knowledge is imperfect, and our prophecy is imperfect. But when the perfect comes, the imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall understand fully, even as I have been fully understood. So faith, hope, and love abide, these three. But the greatest of all of these is love. Well, that chapter 13 of St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians is a kind of a Magna Carta on love. It gives us kind of a window through which to see some of the dimensions of love. Love is, I'll use an analogy, it's kind of like a diamond or another kind of a jewel with different facets. It reflects the one light first one way, then another. Love has many different facets or dimensions, but the substance of it, what really makes it what it is, and nothing other than that, is what we talked about before, and that's self-sacrifice. That's that willingness to sacrifice yourself for the one you love. Now, in recent years, I think we've had a movement away from that, the me generation, right? I should put me first. I should stick up for myself. I deserve this, and I'm entitled to that. That's the antithesis of authentic love. I've often said, put God first. Put everybody else second, yourself last, and then what will happen? Well, the fulfillment of a promise will happen. The last become first. You have to do it that way if you want to live fully. Let me tell you one of the best ways remember, we're talking about life. So when we talk about living, we're talking about life. A lot of people are living, they're pretty much dead. And they wonder why. Even young people today, in many cases, they're unhappy. Why? Because the world has made certain empty promises to them. Do this, try this. You'll be happy, it'll be fun, you'll feel good. And then it doesn't, or maybe only for a few minutes, and then it leaves you cold, empty. They become discouraged and disillusioned by the time they're in their mid-teens. Suicide is the #1 cause of death among young people in many places in the Western world. Used to be automobile accidents, still is some places, but suicide. Why? If you live in a self-centered way, sooner or later, you won't be living at all. If you want to expand your being, if you want to live more fully, then give yourself away, in a manner of speaking. Mother Teresa taught us that, right? I remember meeting Mother right before she died. I used to give retreats to her sisters. Matter of fact, at lunch I was talking to some of my friends about some of the experiences I had with the Missionaries of Charity. And Mother had heard that I was giving retreats and the nuns liked them, and she asked to meet me. So she was in Washington, D.C. at the same time I was, the year that she died. She went to receive the Medal of Freedom, which is the highest honor the United States government bestows upon a civilian. I was there to preach at the Rosary Congress at the Basilica in Washington, D.C. So I had a call from one of the sisters. She said, "Mother wants you to come and celebrate Mass tomorrow, and she'd like to meet you." I said, "Okay." So I did that. After, they brought me in a little room, and Mother was close to death by then. It was the Solemnity of the Sacred Heart of Jesus, a Friday, and she was in a wheelchair. They brought her in. They left us. She looked, I remember, she looked very much like John Paul looked after he had died. I don't know if you remember the pictures, but he had been such a powerful figure, a strong man, very vigorous. And then toward the end of his life, you know, he was so, I remember kneeling as his body lay in state in St. Peter's. I was fortunate enough to be able to go. And I remember the night before the funeral, kneeling, that's another story, how I got right next to his body. Almost no one could get in that close. I got into St. Peter's with one of our young priests in the Society of Our Lady. He had a special pass. He was a member of the priests in the Vicariate of Rome, so he had a special pass, and we got in a back door of St. Peter's, and we got up pretty close and we prayed, and 3 Swiss guards came up to me. Now, there were Swiss guards at that event dressed 3 different ways. They were 3 different kinds. Some of them were undercover. They were dressed like the FBI would be dressed, and you didn't know they were the Swiss guards. But then you had the Swiss guards in the full regalia, and those were the ones that came up to me. And one of them said in English, "Follow us." Oh no, first they saluted. First they saluted, and then they said, "Follow us." They led me right through the crowd, right up to where the Holy Father's body lay in state, and there was a kneeler there. I knelt down. They stood at attention. Next minute, I'm alone. It's just me and them. So I prayed, got up, they escorted me back through the crowd, saluted, and left. They left me standing there wondering what had just happened. I had no clue what that was all about. I have more connections in Las Vegas than I do at the Vatican. So I had no idea what that was about. A couple minutes later, there was one of the ushers dressed in a tuxedo. An Italian gentleman said to me, "Hey, I know who you are." I said, "You do?" He said, "Yeah, we have television in Italy, you know." He said, "That was pretty good what the Cardinals just did for you." I said, "Cardinals?" He said, "Yeah, the 2 German cardinals." You know, he was still a cardinal then. Right. Cardinal Ratzinger and Cardinal Schönborn. I said, "What do you mean? What did they do?" The Swiss guards. They sent the Swiss guard to escort you up to the Holy Father's body as an honor because of the catechism series that has gone all over the world. They know who you are. I didn't know. I never would have known what had happened. No one told me. I never would have known if that man hadn't seen it and understood it. And so I kind of marveled. I really marveled at that. Love. That's the substance and the sum of our religion, and if you don't live in love, you cannot live. In fact, your life will be impoverished and diminished. Now, I know this is simple, this is elemental, but you have to get this. God first. The vertical dimension, our love for God. So I love God, God loves me, the interchange of love between God and the soul. I call that the vertical dimension of love. Then you have that's the first commandment, right? To love the Lord your God with your whole heart, mind, and strength. The second's like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's the horizontal dimension. We love each other. How can we love each other, though? You know there are going to be days where I aggravate you with any luck at all. And there are going to be days when you might do the same thing to me. So how can we love each other all the time? There'll be days when we don't have the warm, fuzzy feeling for each other. We might not even like each other on a good day or a bad day. How can you do it? The vertical dimension has to come first. You must love God first with your whole heart. God doesn't want half-hearted lovers. It says with your whole heart and your whole mind and your whole strength. Then you will be enabled and capacitated. You'll have the strength and the ability to love everybody else out of love for God. But it has to be in that order. You must establish the relationship with God first, or else sooner or later love's going to fail. You will be unfaithful in one way or another. Somebody else will be unfaithful to you in one way or another. I don't just mean in marriage. In any way, someone will betray you. Sometimes I have to fight the tendency, the feeling to not like people anymore. Someone said to me once, "I think you like dogs more than people." And I had to think about that for a while. I have 3 dogs, you know, I live with them. I never had a dog that stabbed me in the back. Not one. I have never had one. I have never had a dog that betrayed me. I have never had a dog that was willing to cut my throat for money or some other advantage. Never. Of course, they don't have that ability. They don't have the use of intellect and free will. I think they're just a special gift that God gives us to help us, console us. But people, that's the problem. A friend of mine, one of my friends who has been traveling with me for over 15 years, he employs a lot of people. I think he employs like 500 people. And sometimes he'll say to me, there's only one problem in life. And I'll say, what's that, Sal? He said, people. If we can get that one resolved, we've pretty much got it resolved. How are we going to do it? The relationship with God must come first. How are you going to do that? Fundamentals, your prayer life, the sacramental life of the church, a life of virtue. It's not something that just happens. You have to do it. It's like when I was sick a couple years ago. I really got sick. I'm pretty sure I would have died within a year. It was a dumb thing, really. It was not like a cancer or some major illness. But 7 doctors in my area couldn't get it. They couldn't figure it out, couldn't diagnose it. I was exhausted, spent 18, 20 hours a day in bed. I couldn't hardly move. I was so exhausted. Finally went to the Mayo Clinic. They couldn't even diagnose it. After, I don't know, I'd get 6:30 in the morning till 5 at night, going from one department to the next, one consultation to the next. And the Mayo Clinic, by the way, is a fantastic place. It's a great medical facility. I think there are 15,000 physicians and surgeons in one area. So I had great medical care, but they were a little perplexed by it, but they finally figured it out. Vitamin D deficiency, if you can believe that. It's an epidemic in northern climates. You don't have that problem down here. But up in Montana, we don't see the sun for about 6 months of the year. And I'd been in Alaska for a while, and there was just no sunlight. And that's the normal way that your body is able to synthesize that hormone. Vitamin D isn't a vitamin, it's a hormone, actually. And it is absolutely required. Your immune system can't function without vitamin D. There's a lot of research that the Mayo Clinic and other places are doing now. They call it an epidemic, linked to 13 kinds of cancer, vitamin D deficiency. Anyway, they figured it out. Very simple solution. Take vitamin D. Right? 2,000 to 3,000 units a day for most people in northern climates. So then I started to get better. And I looked at myself and I said to myself, Pillsbury Doughboy, you are a sad and sorry sight. And you better do something or you're going to die. Now, in my home, I have a nice room off of my office. It's kind of a glass room. I can see the mountains outside. And from my desk, I can look into my exercise room. And I have an incline elliptical trainer and a bench and, you know, weights. And it's a pretty nice exercise room. And I often, frequently, I would look in there and admire my equipment. And nothing happened. I didn't lose any weight. I didn't start to feel better. So I said, well, I guess I actually have to use it. So I started, and a friend of mine referred me to a personal trainer, Sheena, Queen of the Jungle, I fondly referred to her as. And she is, I'll tell you, she's a top was top national fitness competitor, and very, very professional. So we began. It did not happen by chance. You have to do it. You actually have to do something. Love doesn't happen by accident. The fullness of life doesn't happen by accident. The purpose of our existence isn't fulfilled by accident. It isn't just something that happens. It's something that you have to do. Love is not a feeling. Please read my lips. Love is not a feeling. Love is a decision. Let me say it again. Love is a decision. Love is an act of the will. It's not a warm, fuzzy feeling. You decide to love. You decide to live to the fullest. You decide to achieve your God-given purpose in this life. It's a decision, it's an act of the will. It doesn't just happen. You must make it happen through the power of grace. Now Jesus says, I am the vine, you are the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. And that's certainly true. However, you can be certain God will do his part. You can be equally certain you must do your part. We can't just sit back and be lazy. Think about the incredible effort that people expend for any number of transient purposes, like making money, for instance, having things, getting to the Super Bowl, winning the World Series. Those are all good things. I mean, those are fine things. And any kind of excellence is a good thing as far as I'm concerned. But if you take all those things and put them all together, they're nothing compared to your eternal salvation. You expend all that effort to be successful. I mean, the incredible effort we expend to be successful. What do we do to help save our soul? Now, listen, you need to think about this. I don't know if anybody else will ever tell you this again. Therefore, I have to take my best shot. Okay? And please remember this. When you get to the gates of heaven, it is likely I will be there to remind you of this moment. I will follow you. I will haunt you. You will wake up in the middle of the night and you will see me. And I will be smiling at you. You know those little things that kids have? It's like a baseball bat, but it's plastic and it makes a honk honk when you hit somebody with it? I'll have one of those. Don't let it go in one ear and out the other. This is real. Honestly, this is real. St. Paul reminded us, look, don't fight as though you were shadow boxing. This is a real fight. Fight so as to win. Fight the good fight. Run the race to the finish line. This is the big one, folks. This is the war to end all wars. It wasn't World War I or World War II. This is it. Your life, my life, the story of dour combat with the forces of evil. That's what this is about. Love is the answer. It's the key. But there are very few people who understand what that really means. I hope that you do, at least a tiny bit better than when we started. And I know I say the same thing over and over again, but I have to. Some of my friends that are involved with the psychology of education have told me that you have to repeat something 18 times for the human brain to once and for all comprehend it. I don't know about that, if that's true or not. But any educator, any communicator knows repetition, a certain amount of it, is necessary in order to get the point across. You have to say it more than once. Heaven, hell. Saved, not saved. Accept grace, reject grace. Light, darkness. Truth, lies. Good, evil, life, death. That's not complicated. That's simple. You know how to do that. You know what's in the Bible. You know what it says. You know what the church teaches. Unfortunately, that's not good enough. I used to think, like Plato, that if we could only educate people, we would have an ideal society. Wrong. Education is a good thing. However, it's not enough. I have found that most of us know, now note the word know, that concerns the intellect. The proper object of the intellect is truth. Most of us know more than enough to be canonized saints. Unfortunately, no saint was ever canonized for what he knew, only for what he or she did. And so the problem is in the will. It's one thing to know it, it's another thing to do it. We know the 10 Commandments. I'm sure we do. That basic moral teaching. Everybody knows that. Oh, no, you don't. How about a test? Quiz? Oop, look, all the heads, they're all looking down. Oh, no, don't call on me. I used to do this back in the old days when I first started preaching. Don't worry, I'm not going to do it. The 10 Commandments, you can't get more basic than that, right? I mean, really. First communion children should know the 10 Commandments, right? Sure. Well, how long have you been practicing the faith? If I said, what's the third commandment? Did you get it? No, a bunch of you didn't. What's the seventh commandment? What's the eighth? Now, do you know the 10 Commandments? Do you have to get them in order? Yup. The second commandment is not the seventh commandment. Yeah, you have to know every one. That's not everything, admittedly. But it's something. But knowing the 10 Commandments is not the same thing as doing the 10 Commandments. Now, we're all sinners. And I'm sure that we all know and did know if we ever committed a given sin, like say, thou shalt not steal, let's say. I'm sure we all knew that, and maybe somebody stole something, even if it was a penny when you were a child or a small thing. You knew it, but you did it. And that's where the problem is. It's in the will. That's where the struggle is. That's where the battle is. So how do you do that? That's a manifestation of love. Faith is wrapped up in this. You have to have faith to have the kind of love that we're talking about. Now, I know you know what faith is. The theological virtue of faith? Not more than 3 people in here don't know the definition of the theological virtue of faith. Therefore, for the sake of the 3, faith is the theological virtue by which we believe in God. I'll bet you would have gotten that part right. Faith, I believe in God. Okay, good. What does that mean, though? When I say I believe in God, we believe in God. So the definition expounds upon our belief. We believe in God. We believe all that God has said and revealed to us. Note that it says all. It doesn't say some of what God has revealed to us, part of what God has revealed to us, a percentage of what God has revealed to us. No, all that God has revealed to us and all that Holy Church proposes for our belief, because he who has revealed it is truth itself. That's right out of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, definition of the theological virtue of faith. You will not practice the fullness of love without faith, because you will rationalize that away. I run into it every single day of my life. I've heard things like, well, God loves me no matter what. Well, amen. Yes, God does love you no matter what. God does have unconditional love. Yes, that's true. That's a true statement. Well, even if I'm living in sin, God loves you. Even if I'm the worst sinner, but I've committed sin, you don't know what I did, Father. Yeah. God loves you. But he doesn't love the sin that's eating you alive. You have to have faith, real faith, in order to exercise real love, in order to live the fullness of life that God calls us to. And what's the purpose of that life? As we said before, remember Sister Mildred when she floated into the classroom? Why did God create you? Maybe in my later years I will float. I often thought that someday I'd like to be like Sister Mildred. Well, maybe not quite as wide, but at least so I could float. I'd like to be able to have stage presence like Sister Mildred did. Wow. And if I floated into right in front of you and I said, why did God create you? Which is another way of saying, what's the meaning of our existence? Same question. You would say, God created me, or the meaning of my existence is that I might know God, love God, and serve God. Why? That I might be happy with him in heaven for all eternity. Now, if I said that 100 times today, it wouldn't be too many. People are lost. People are lost today. And the only way they're going to find themselves is through you. Don't think there's some other way. No, God works through instruments. You're like God's compass. You help show people the way. Why are we here? Why did God create us? What's the purpose of our existence? Know God. What does it mean to know God? How can you know God? How can you know the Father we have not seen with these human eyes? Through Jesus. No one can know the Father except through the Son. No one goes to the Father except through the Son. And so we look at Jesus. Jesus is the way that we know God. Now, everybody has a different idea of who Jesus is. How do you know the authentic Christ? You listen to the church. You listen to the church. That's why it's important for you to know your faith. I have a hypothesis, and true to my character, I'm 100% subjectively certain that I'm correct. I have no fear of error that I could possibly be wrong on this. And I already have bet everything that I'm right. Jesus is it. And you don't have to look any further than that. And how do you know him? You know him through the church's teaching. I find it amazing that individual human beings think they know more than the church when it comes to the church's teaching. They summarily dismiss some element of faith or morals which must be believed. I just gave you part of the definition of heresy, by the way. We don't talk about things like that anymore because this is a rather weak-kneed and spineless generation that's afraid to talk hard talk. We don't like to do that because we don't want to offend anybody. Well, I don't like to offend anybody either. Nobody should want to offend anybody on purpose. However, sometimes there are people that need offending. Therefore, being an equal opportunity offender, I am happy to perform a public service and offend them up one side and down the other. It's necessary. Really. I try to do it in a somewhat lighthearted manner. I don't really want to hurt anybody's feelings, but you know, you are not exercising charity by telling someone what they want to hear. You are not exercising charity by confirming someone in their sins. Imagine you're out in the swamp. I've been in some swamps in my life. When I was in the Army, when the Vietnam War was going on, the Army had some wonderful training facilities, like Fort Polk, Louisiana is one that comes to mind, or the Panama Canal Zone, where they would train the troops for jungle-type warfare. Gosh, they were horrible places. You know, snakes, alligators. Well, they don't have anything on South Texas when it comes to heat and humidity, but they were hot, they were humid. You know, they had all kinds of critters. I mean, the mosquitoes would carry a small dog off. Inhospitable places to be. Morally speaking, that's the world we live in. Use that as an analogy. It's like we live in a kind of a moral swamp in the contemporary world today. All kinds of things that bite, sting, come after you. Heat, humidity, alligators. That's the world. That's the world we live in. I remember they tried to teach us, to equip us for survival. A couple months ago, I did a new series, and it's out now. It's available. I think we even have it with us here, but it's called 21st Century Spiritual Survival Manual. And one of my graphic arts designers took the actual survival manual that the Army has used, and he kind of copied the cover, changed the design a little bit. It's important. Survival. Do you know how to survive? What kind of survival I'm talking about here? Moral, spiritual, getting from point A to point B. You're behind enemy lines. You are behind enemy lines. This isn't hypothetical. You are behind enemy lines in this world today. We live in a neo-pagan society. How will you survive? How will you get from point A to point B without getting killed or captured? You know, part of survival training is what we call escape and evasion. One of my favorite fun things that ever happened when I was in the Army was the E&E. Oh, I liked it. I was motivated when I was 18 years old. This was back in the 60s when the Vietnam War was going on. I remember I enlisted in the Army. People were trying to dodge the draft and hide in Canada, and the worst thing that could happen is your number came up and you had to go. I liked it. I remember being in the barracks and I could hear the sound of crying, because in those days, basic training, we had everybody together, National Guard, regular Army, enlisted guys, drafted guys, all together. And at night, frequently, you could hear guys crying. They didn't want to be there. They wanted to be home. They had wives, moms, dads, children. Can't blame them. I wanted to be there. I was motivated. Are you motivated to be here in this war? If you are not, you will become a casualty. I remember some of the drill instructors we had, they had done 1, 2, 3 tours in Southeast Asia. They were grizzled, tough veterans. They knew the ropes. They wanted to keep us alive. In case you don't know it, I want to keep you alive. You need to get from point A to point B. What's point A? Right here, now, here, this life. What's point B? Heaven. Escape and evasion. The enemy's after you. You don't believe it? You should have been in my hotel room last night. Someday, that'll be in my book, by the way. Or maybe I'll have to write a separate book because there's too much. You know, people play kind of fast and loose with some of the church's teaching. The existence and activity of the fallen angels is a doctrine of the faith. It's not a take it or leave it proposition. You have to believe it, or you're not Catholic. That's like some people can say, well, I could be pro-choice and Catholic. No. Sorry. You cannot be pro-choice and Catholic. You're one or you're the other. That's a no-brainer. We do a grave disservice to anyone to promote that idea. You cannot be a Catholic anything and pro-death. That's anti-life. Remember, this is about life, this conference. That's anti-love. And that is definitely anti-purpose of our existence. You can't do it. I can't imagine what's going to happen when history records this generation. I cannot imagine what a scathing critique there will be that such vast numbers of supposedly intelligent people all over the world could have possibly swallowed the most ridiculous, unbelievable lie that it's something other than a human being in the womb. How is it possible that a bill of goods like that could be sold to so many people? You know how many abortions the average Russian woman has? 8. Average Russian woman. It's merely a form of birth control, as Pope Paul VI said it would be if we ever allowed it. We live in a free country. That's frightening. That is frightening. That means we have some responsibility for what happens in this country. The laws, the practice. I wake up in the middle of the night sweating sometimes. I get this feeling of impending doom, like the sword of Damocles is suspended over the earth. Do you think honestly that God will countenance the slaughter of hundreds of millions of the most innocent without consequences? Do you really believe that's possible? Have you deluded yourself? And I'm not talking to you because I know that most of you don't feel that way at all. But I'm talking to the world in general. Would God countenance that? What else would it be? You know, I marvel at it. I read some of the language in some of the legal decisions and some of the documents, and it defies logic. It defies common sense. It defies right reason. What do you think it is in a human mother's womb if it's not a human being? What could it be? Rock? Vegetable? Elephant? What else could it be? If it is not human from the moment of conception, it will never be human. And it is not a potential human being. It is a human being with potential. Very, very simply put. That's old news. I know. I know. You've heard it all a million times before, and I have too. The clock is ticking, and the approach of midnight is close at hand. With every passing moment, we become more and more and more responsible. And I have to ask myself, too, have I done enough? Have I done enough to inspire people, to educate people, to try to change people so that we can do something about this? Even as we speak, our country and the entire Western world is collapsing. And someone will say, oh, you're a pessimist. No, I'm a realist. And you are blind if you can't see it. The economic doom that is well down the road is a consequence of the moral doom that we have precipitated and brought down upon our own heads. Can you imagine even for a moment that we can get away with this? Well, we're going to get what we deserve. Free country, you vote. Well, I think we're going to get more than we bargained for, and soon. Watch what happens next year. I've been saying this for 20. I've never been wrong. I'd say so if I was. I've not once been wrong on these things, ever. Next year, the economic situation will radically deteriorate even more. Unemployment will double rapidly within a year to 2 years. Double. Right now, the figures they give are wrong. They don't count the people that have given up looking. Unemployment's 15%, if it's anything. Where I live, it's close to 20. People's savings are running out. Oh, you can extend unemployment benefits for 28 weeks, then what? Do it again? Where's the money coming from? This cost, that cost, spiraling deficit, increasing taxes, more burdens, more entitlements, then what? Then people like me and 1,000 other baby boomers, 1 million other baby boomers, we shut down our businesses and retire early. And millions of people more will be unemployed. And who will employ them? The government? Yeah, that's the plan. Like ancient Rome, the people enslaved to the whim of the Caesars. Oh, they set up the games to amuse the people. And they would throw out bread to them. And the people, appeased for a moment, didn't even realize the slavery that they had fallen victim to. Yes, you may say I'm a radical, I'm over the line, I'm a pessimist. Keep talking and just watch. Stay tuned. If something doesn't happen, something very serious will happen. Stay tuned, you don't believe it. You just watch. By next year, the socialist, communist politicians who will reduce you to a cruel slavery very quickly, whether you like it or not, or believe it or not, and the guilty thing is silence. That's all that evil requires, is that good men and women remain silent. And so we sit in our complacency. We hope for the best, we should, but don't expect it if you don't do something about it. Part of love is acting. If my brother is enslaved to something that's harmful to him, like a way of life that takes away his dignity, making him imagine that he can have that dignity without feeling good about himself through work, I don't love my brother. But if I help him, try to lift him up, but not enslave him. You know, I once saw a drug dealer in Los Angeles going through a neighborhood handing out free samples. Here, try this. Try this. Try this. You don't have to pay, it's free. Try this. What did he do? He was engaged in advertising and promotion. And what happened? They liked it. They got hooked on it. You can get hooked on heroin, you can get hooked on free money. Something for nothing. That's happening. And unless you do something about it, it's going to go from bad to worse. I fully expect that in my lifetime, what this country looks like will be totally different. And we say, oh, it couldn't happen here. It's not possible. Well, it will. It will. Read history. Read the history of Nazi Germany and every communist country that ever rose and fell and the crowns rolled in the dust. Read it and see what you find. You will find that history repeats itself, and we're doing that right now. Right now. Part of love is action. Sit on your butt and do nothing and perish, or get up and fight and go forward. If I love my neighbor as myself out of love for God, I'm going to do something to help him restore his human dignity. If you do that, you'll be doing part of that mission, accomplishing that purpose for which we were created. We weren't created simply to amass toys, like the bumper sticker I see sometimes. Whoever has the most toys wins, right? Nope. The degree of glory we have in heaven will be directly proportional to the degree of charity we achieve on earth. And I submit to you that part of that charity has to do with caring enough about our brothers and sisters to raise a hue and a cry when our brothers and sisters are having their dignity removed. We're drifting into bad times. You have to do something. I'm not going to be talking much longer. I'm almost finished with my course, and I don't mean just in this conference. I'm coming pretty close to the end. What are you going to do? When I stand before God, I hope I'm going to be able to say, well, I tried at least. I tried. What about you? Are you going to be able to say that? I hope so. I think so. In your own place, in your own way, in your own time. You're called to excellence. You're called to heroism. This is the time. We don't have any more time. Time's up. The battle is on. Take up the weapons God's given you, spiritual weapons, and fight the good fight. Run the race to the finish line. Please.